Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do.
But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long-snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy.
They're just gonna remember some guys now.
And everybody knows he's ready to fire on the first one. Bases loaded, Young swings, line drive, that is down and to the wall. Cruz is in, Pierce is in, Hardy around third, he's going to try to score, and safe! The Orioles have remembered that guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks. It's me, one of your hosts, James, here in Charm City, and also here with my charming co-host.
It's great to be here. It's a great time to be an Orioles fan for you, James. I'm thrilled for you, even though I'm not an Orioles fan. I think I get proximity. I feel with the Ravens, at least. The Ravens always solidly AFC because of Flacco.
I, for years, have crowed about what I think should be an I-95 allyship. We are different leagues. We are different conferences for the two sports that we as cities share. I think there's a lot of Orioles-Phillies love. I think there's a lot of Eagles-Ravens love, and there should be. We should maintain that I-95 alliance.
I'm with it. Bird Gang. I'm Diaz, but I dilly-dally too much. I dilly-dally too much. I want to introduce the man whose laugh you just heard. He is our very special guest, and he knows a thing or two about hot starts. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, you know what? It's me. I can't think of anything good to say because I was distracted by that fire truck that just went by. So I'm just the very special guest Xavier.
Fireman
That fire truck, they're coming here to put out that hot start. No, there's probably an emergency going on. Anyway, I've got an emergency, which is that I don't know what's making memories for you guys right now. We need to rectify this. That's actually what the EMTs are coming for.
Ooh, I need to go first because we need to celebrate a guy who we've already celebrated before. Because I don't know if you saw this, but Lindsey Harding was named G League Coach of the Year.
Yup. Stockton Kings.
That's incredible.
Yes, for the Stockton Kings. Went 24-10, best record in all of the G League, and she is the first ever female coach to win Coach of the Year for the G League, and I think that's phenomenal because she is a really, really good coach. We talked about Lindsey Harding before, and we briefly mentioned, her coaching career.
Belarusian legend Lindsey Harding.
And we briefly mentioned, her coaching career at that point, and I thought there was going to be more to come from her because at this point she was an assistant for the Sacramento Kings. Of everyone out there, it's either going to be her or Becky Hammon who becomes the first female head coach in the NBA. It's going to happen.
At this point, put pretty solid money on Lindsey Harding. Like, if I'm Becky Hammon, I don't see a reason to leave the Las Vegas Aces before Asia Wilson does.
Probably. I mean, Becky Hammon is in a great spot right now, but I could also see San Antonio coming back if Pop retires, be like,
it's Brett Brown. I'm with Diaz on this. Brett Brown takes up the mantle in San Antonio.
I will cry as he is entirely engulfed by Wemby's freakishly long arms when they hug after you guys win the 2027. I think 2027 feels like the first year you win the finals.
He can just kind of hug someone twice. Wemby's arms go around Brett Brown and they just then go around a second time.
A total eclipse. But yeah, I mean, throw it for Lindsey Harding, and obviously, me being a Sixers fan, Nick Nurse is our head coach. Nick Nurse got his start in the G League, so it's an absolute pathway. I believe he was a former G League Coach of the Year. So, like Xavier said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. At this point, throw it for Lindsey.
Really happy for Lindsey. I'm also very happy that Freedom Autumn is okay. This past weekend was the Conti Cup final, which is essentially the Women's League Cup final in England. And it was Arsenal versus Chelsea, biggest rivalry in English women's soccer, or Diaz's hatred for the hashtag United Women at this point.
Listen, I don't hate them, but I do have to say, Spen took some cheap shots at they thought they could just buy their team. And I'm like, listen, man, I'm glad you won. Good for you. You don't know shit about Newcastle women, bro. Like, stay on that side. But anyway, continue.
So in this final, it was really hard fought, testy game, 0-0 in second half stoppage time when Frida Monum, who is a Norway international Arsenal midfielder, just collapsed off the ball. No one around her. Very scary scenes. Had to get stretchered off. Thankfully, she is okay. Cardiac workup found nothing out of the ordinary, and she has a heart monitor, but she's doing all right. Very good, like the best news of that game. Arsenal did then go on to win in the 116th minute on a Stina Blackstenius goal. So, very good day, thankfully, with everything that happened. There was some wild scenes at the end, though, when Chelsea coach and future U.S. women's national team coach Emma Hayes shoved Arsenal coach Jonas Eidevall after the final whistle blew. And then in her post-match press conference, what's the best way to put this? Yelled a lot about his, quote, male aggression and caused a big stir. You know, again, I am a guy talking about this, and I want to be clear that I am not the authority on this. It does seem from most people that I follow, including a lot of female pundits and soccer players, journalists, Emma Hayes was just being a sore loser in this, in that the issue stemmed from the fact that prior to the game, they could choose whether to have a multi-ball system or one ball. The difference is that if a ball goes out of play with the multi-ball system, you can just grab the closest ball, throw it in. If it's one ball, no, you have to go get that same ball. And both teams have to choose to do multi-ball. Arsenal said they wanted to do it. Chelsea said no, only the one ball system. And so that's what they played with. After Arsenal scored deep into extra time, a ball went out of play fully, and Chelsea tried just taking the multi-ball and throwing it onto the pitch to get it started quickly. And Jonas said, can't do that. You got to go get that ball because that's what you wanted at the start of the game. You can't just change your mind now when it's convenient for you. And Chelsea's captain got very mad at him for saying that and stepped to him and yelled at him. And that's what led to Emma Hayes yelling at and then shoving Jonas Eidevall. So that did mar things for a little bit, along with the Frida Monum collapse. Seems like Monum's okay, and that thing is blown over. So I can say that I'm happy that Arsenal won that game. Very good time if you like women's sports, and I'm sure someone else is going to talk about them. So if either of you want to talk about the women's college basketball, I'll throw to you right now.
I mean, let's talk about Caitlin Clark, because here's what I think I finally settled on. For a while, the comparison has been Steph Curry, right? She can shoot from deep range. She makes these great passes. But I don't think that necessarily does her justice. There is such a sense of inevitability when you watch Caitlin Clark in a big game. Like, you knew she was going to get 40. You knew she was going to tear it up from deep. You knew she was going to be setting up her teammates. You just knew it was going to happen. Like, there wasn't, oh, I wonder if she's going to step up. It was, I'm excited to see how she dominates this moment. The comparison is Michael Jordan. And I'll say it right now.
There it is. There it is. Look, I'm not going to disagree with you. I just, truly love your ability to commit to a take.
Like, when she gets into the W, I've already said this. You got the next 2 years, maybe, to try to squeeze a title out. Aces can continue building it.
It took MJ a while. Like
Fair.
you were saying, there's an inevitability.
Fair point.
There is an inevitability. Presumably, she and Aaliyah Boston will win a title at some point.
Right. And good point. It did take Jordan, I think it was his 7th year, was when he finally won his first championship. I don't think it's going to take her quite that long. And I think when she gets started, the rest of the league is just playing for second for a while. Absolutely unreal to dominate that game in that way. And it was also delightful because, as one of Kim Mulkey's biggest haters, to see her just refuse to adjust in any way and just say, go get him, Haley. Keep trying.
I think my favorite thing out there was a tweet saying it was about Haley Von Lith actually preventing the race war by taking all of the hatred over the rest of the LSU players, being stuck on Caitlin Clark the whole time, regardless of what else was going on.
And that's not fair to Haley. What I loved about this game was that it was clearly Kim Mulkey's fault that they lost. Like 100% this falls on Kim Mulkey's shoulders. And you don't have to blame anyone on the LSU team who all seem like perfectly fine and likable individuals.
I mean, at some point, like, I understand you don't want to put Flaugier on her because then if Flaugier gets in foul trouble, it can muck up your offense. But, like, at a certain point, you got to make that switch.
You just
to
do something. You have to coach a basketball team.
Like, one of the most encouraging things that I've seen for seeing women's basketball just, like, take root. Obviously, there's always some assholes that are on social media saying dumb things. Almost all of the criticism was just about, like, the game. Like, all of the memes were just roasting Haley Van Lith for being a turnstile.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was all it was. And it's like, it's exactly the same way that you would meme on somebody in the NBA if they get torched all night. It was the exact same thing. Like, it is fully apart. We are so blessed to be in this moment where it's not the apex moment because it's going to continue growing. But, like, this certainly feels like a launching off point in the history of women's basketball.
And most watched women's basketball game of all time. Higher than every NBA Finals game except one, all Stanley Cup games, even some NFL games, which is insane given that the NFL outviews literally everything else in existence.
And importantly, it wasn't in the arena that had incorrect 3-point lines.
Which is insane. It's like...
Speaking of things marring things.
Yeah, the one classic, one step forward, but then the step forward is immediately into a rake, which then smacks the NCAA in the face. I'll blame the NCAA for that one. I think we can all just gladly say that's the
Connor
NCAA's
Sports,
fault.
for the record, I did look up the vendor. It's Connor Sports is the name of the business that is in charge of the courts, so it is technically their fault.
Absolutely incredible. Honestly, I don't know which is more shocking, that first, an error of this kind can be made. But second, there were already 2 complete games that were played on the court before anybody said anything. Like,
fun fact, teams did worse on the one with the shorter 3-point line. And I think it's you're so automatic from that distance that shortening it by just like a couple inches, because everyone played on both sides having it. So everyone in theory had equal attempts on either side. And yeah, everyone did a little bit better on the normal 3-point line versus the closer one.
There's definitely something to be said for the muscle memory of I come off a screen, I catch, I have my feet right on the line, I'm shooting. This is how much power I'm supposed to put on it. Like, you're not even aiming at a certain perspective. It is muscle memory. So I do see that, but just don't want to forget about the men. It is shaping up for a good Final Four on their side as well. I think the brackets have broken in just about the exact way that you would have wanted on both sides. We're going to get Paige Beckers versus Caitlin Clark again, which is just fucking awesome, and I'm so glad Paige is back. And then on the other side, you have South Carolina going against this kind of, I don't want to say Cinderella because they're a 3 seed, but I don't think anybody expected NC State to be here.
NC State counts as a double Cinderella. Raleigh is a Cinderella area at this point.
Right. I mean, and on that men's side, I mean, Zach Edey versus DJ Burns. Holy shit. I just want to see, clear it out.
Godzilla X Kong on the court.
I don't need the other 4 guys on each team. They can, just go hang out in the corner. That's fine. I just need these 2 just fucking going at it in the post every single time. Great time to be a college basketball fan. And one other thing that I just wanted to shout out, baseball, Phillies. I usually don't care about April baseball, but I do care when there's some kind of guy-adjacent story. And have either of you heard about Ricardo Pinto and his adventure into the Phillies?
Yes,
bullpen?
It was on PTI yesterday.
Well, there you go. So Xavier knows a little bit, but James, allow me to fill you in. Ricardo Pinto is a Venezuelan who has been in the Phillies pipeline for a while. He's a pitching prospect. He signed kind of around the same time Ranger Suarez did, so they came up together. Rangers obviously already found pretty significant success with the Phillies. But earlier this week, he did get his call up. The only issue was there was no transportation available to Philadelphia other than the fact that he just had to get in his car and he just had to floor it. And he just had to get to Citizens Bank Park as quickly as he could. He didn't arrive until the 4th inning. In the 5th inning, he goes to the bullpen to warm up. He's called in, and he gets the 4-inning save in his first Major League Baseball appearance.
It was the best road trip ever.
Just the idea of like, it was literally within probably about 15 minutes of him parking his car to then being on the mound and making his MLB debut.
Hell yeah.
Unfathomable. And look, who knows what kind of career he's going to bear, but I'm a huge Ricardo Pinto fan. That's a crazy story. Hope he is a worthy addition to that Phillies bullpen.
Go Phils, in addition to the Bird Hive. One last thing about college basketball is that we will also, later this evening as we record, give up the biggest honor in college basketball, which is the 69th best team, the NIT champion. And I just want to say real quick that deep down in my heart, I believe in Indiana State. So I would like to congratulate the Seton Hall Pirates for winning, since that is where my heart leans. I wanted to ask the two of you, does the name Zaner Bloser mean anything to you?
No, but it's great.
This sounds like the 7th member of the Cobra Gym dodgeball team. That's what that sounds like.
And Stalinokovich. Davidovitsky.
It is the hyphenated name of an organization, a couple things. It's 2 last names from a couple of guys from Pennsylvania who grew up in the late 1800s and were super duper into handwriting. They went to handwriting schools, became classmates, and then eventually started not only their own handwriting school and company that published things about handwriting, but Zaner Bloser also created a dialect, I guess, like a font, sort of a uniform font of a number of cursive letters. Like, there was cursive prior to this, but they created this new set of cursive characters that became the predominant one that was taught for years and years, even as it was later kind of not fully supplanted, but had to share the top tier with another script that came up, Danielian. I'm getting a lot of this, by the way, from a NBC News write-up by Mary Flum, P-F-L-U-M. I believe that's pronounced Flum. Anyway, it had still been one of the top 2. It's estimated that about 90% of people learn one of these 2 cursive scripts. But the other thing about Zaner Bloser is, as I mentioned, they had this company. And in 1972, it's purchased by Highlights. We all remember Highlights magazine from the dentist office. Then in 1992, they started holding a little competition. And this year, we had the 33rd edition of that. This starts that NBC News write-up by Mary Flum. It's regarded, hands down, as the Super Bowl of penmanship tournaments. We are talking about the Zaner Bloser National Handwriting Contest, which has been held every year since 1992. It is held for school-age children. There's 9 different age/grade levels. And they have to send in a sample of their handwriting with 2 things. They have to write the sentence, "The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog," because it has every letter in the English alphabet at least once in there. And then they have to write a short response, and this is all in cursive, about how handwriting makes them better as readers and writers, how that kind of improves them in that sense. I'm going to say, before I go any further, I handwrite all my notes for this show. While I don't write in cursive, I do love me some good handwriting. So this spoke to me. And I found out that apparently it's speaking to many people. This article goes on to mention this comes at a time where we are having apparently cursive return to schools. California recently became the 22nd state to mandate cursive writing in schools. And I just want to share a quote from a state assembly representative, Sharon Quirk Silva, who had this to say about this bill, her being a sponsor of it. "Handwriting is definitely having a moment. We live in a very polarized nation. So many issues are contentious, but with this handwriting bill, we have full bipartisan support and goodwill. The importance of handwriting is something people seem to agree on." That's the most nothing speak that I've ever heard. Congratulations, Sharon Quirk Silva, on finding a way to channel ChatGPT, but more importantly, congratulations to the winners of the 33rd National Zaner Bloser Handwriting Contest. I just want to share the handwriting contest with you guys.
I'm all for any competition. My only thing is, who's judging this? Who are the judges?
The good folks at Zaner Bloser. There's a panel of judges at Zaner Bloser who are, again, still one of the authorities on cursive handwriting. They receive all of these samples. And they judge them, and the kids win like $500.
I need to know more about this process. The handwriting, do they know names? Do they know grades? Are they just looking at it?
They do know grades. They do know grades because they have to have them sorted into categories. They don't know names. No.
Okay. Got my eyes on you.
Are you trying to get a new job?
I've got my eyes on them. That's all I'm saying.
Who judges the judges?
Exactly. That's what we asked in my high school journalism judging class.
Well, that may be a job that you look into in the future, but we have a job to do here today, and it's one that I'm very excited about. And Xavier, I would love for you to tell us all just a little bit more about it.
So, based on the events of the last week or so, I thought it would be appropriate to honor Baltimore today. See, I don't have anything special to say about Baltimore, but I think, James, you could give a touching tribute to your city.
Yeah, man, I did that one time into the microphone for like 44 minutes. You can go back and listen to it. It's still available. I think my feelings on the subject are well known.
Yes, James loves Baltimore, and I want to talk about Baltimore Guys. Not only did I want to honor a Baltimorean, is that the correct demonym?
Baltimorean is the official one. Baltimorean is the one that we're allowed to say, but you're not. But you can say it for this episode.
I'll stick with Baltimorean then.
Okay, okay. I'm giving you the pass this episode.
So not only did I want to honor a Baltimorean, I wanted to pick a Baltimore or Maryland specific sport for this. So I did some research. James, you probably know this because you know a lot of things. Diaz, do you know what Maryland's official sport is?
Gotta be lacrosse.
That is not true, actually. Lacrosse was added as the official state team sport in 2004, but Maryland was the first U.S. state to adopt a state sport, and they did so in 1962. James, what is it?
Real quick, before I announce that, I want to build up just a little bit more tension by telling you we're also the first state with our own state exercise. In 2008, we made walking the official state exercise in Maryland. Which I think goes hand in hand with being the weird-ass state that made jousting their state sport in 1962. Yes, jousting, Diaz.
Incredible.
Yeah, jousting is indeed Maryland's state sport. The second state to adopt an official state sport was Alaska. 10 years later, no surprise, it was dog mushing. There are some very Maryland-specific sports out there. Fortunately, it's really hard to find any information on individual jousters, so I couldn't go that route. But I did find something else that is very Baltimore specific that I wanted to talk about. That's duck pin bowling.
So I didn't know that like normal bowling existed until I was about 14.
And this is what I've learned
like
from
the little
this
thin
research.
ones, right?
They're little small balls. The pins are. Xavier, I don't want to stop.
Yes, I will go into this. I'll go into this. This story might be apocryphal, but duck pin bowling was said to be invented in Baltimore around 1900 at a bowling, billiards, and pool hall owned by future Baseball Hall of Famers John McGraw and Wilbert Robinson of the original Baltimore Orioles. There are some old newspaper articles from the 1890s that show that it may have been played in Massachusetts. But the National Duckpin Bowling Congress was formed in 1927 and is headquartered in the Baltimore suburb of Linthicum. So Massachusetts can suck it. This is a Baltimore sport.
Also, for the record, it does use the same ball as candlestick bowling in Massachusetts, which is another regional variant. So that is another connection there that I will acknowledge to Massachusetts. Sorry.
Now, candlestick bowling is a little different in that the pins are very thin and tall.
Yeah,
but duck pin, there are pretty significant differences. So duck pin balls themselves are fairly standardized, and in general, they're about 5 inches in diameter, and they weigh less than 4 pounds. This puts them at about half the width and like a quarter of the weight of like regular 10-pin balls. There are also no holes in duck pin balls. So you hold them on the outside, like as if you're gripping a slightly larger baseball.
I didn't know what the fuck to do with the holes, man. Like, I saw the holes and I didn't know what to do. I'd seen them on the Flintstones. I'd seen them on The Simpsons. I didn't know why bowling balls didn't have the holes.
I was really hoping you would have this experience, James, because I don't think we've ever talked about it before. But from everything I was looking, I was like, I pray that James had this
Duckpin
experience
bowling
growing up.
birthday parties, both at the age of like 10 and 26.
Oh, phenomenal. The duck pins themselves are shorter, a bit thinner, and lighter than 10 pins, but they're placed in the same spot as 10 pins. You put these things together, and duck pin bowling is much harder to score because the ball can just roll through a full line without hitting anything. You can get a gutter by just going right down the middle. It's not easy. Because it's so much more difficult, you actually get 3 rolls per frame instead of 2. Getting everything in 10 is still a strike. Getting it in 2 is a spare. Getting it in 3 is just counted as a 10, but there's no additional scoring. And so duckpin bowling is often just called a sport of spares. You're going to end up with a lot of splits, and you're just trying to get spares because strikes are so rare. And just for full comparison, full context, a 300, the mythical score of 10 pin, but actually happens like fairly often, and at the high level you see it multiple times in a tournament. It has never happened in duckpin bowling. There's never been a 300. The closest anyone has gotten was 279 by a man from Connecticut, Pete Signore Jr. in 1992. Like, this isn't something where, maybe it happened somewhere, we just don't have records of it, because the NDBC has extensive records of everything going back to when they were founded in 1927. They have records of like every tournament and every game rolled in these tournaments. The record keeping is phenomenal. Like the opposite of some of the times where we look and say, well, in the 60s, they didn't have all these records. Like, no, these people are fucking passionate about duckpin bowling, so they keep everything. So now that we have some background on what duckpin bowling is, I want to talk about the queen of the duckpins, Mary Elizabeth Ryan. Mary, better known as Toots, and by her, yes.
Hell yeah.
And by her married name, Barger. So it's Toots Barger, born on March 30th, 1913 in Hamilton Hills, in the now northeast corner of Baltimore. It technically wasn't Baltimore at that point. It got annexed into the city like 5 years later. So she grew up in Baltimore. Let's just leave it at that. She attended Eastern High School, which was one of the first 2 public high schools for girls in Baltimore, alongside its sister school, Western. Unfortunately, Eastern no longer exists, but
it's a Hopkins building now.
Yes, I did also see that. But she graduated in 1931, and she begins duckpin bowling in 1939 when she started playing at her cousin's league in Baltimore. At this point, duckpin bowling was so popular in Baltimore that there were lanes in every neighborhood, and 10-pin bowling was completely out of the picture. It did not exist in the city anymore. I want to give a shout out to Stacy Carton, who wrote extensively about Toots and duckpin bowling for the Baltimore Sports Stories from Charm City anthology book. Because this is so old, a lot of the information I'm going to be using comes from him and his research for this book and interviews he did with people, so I want to give a shout out to that ahead of time. There was a 1943 Baltimore Sun article that said, after roughly checking the number of duckpin bowling leagues in the Baltimore area at the present time, one is forced to admit this particular sport is not suffering too much from the war, because all other sports had kind of gone on pause at this point. The check shows that at present there are 506 leagues in existence in this town, with 5,078 teams on their rolls. Counting regulars and substitutes, this makes 35,546 persons who roll regularly in these leagues. So, middle of World War II, there are over 35,000 people competitively duckpin bowling just in Baltimore. During Toots' first league season as a substitute in 1939, she averaged a 96 at Seidel's Lanes on Bel Air Road in Baltimore. Seidel, apologies. The way it kind of worked at this point was you would just, as you improve, you would just go to different lanes where more competitive people were bowling at. So by her third season of duckpin bowling, Toots was averaging 115, which was the 7th highest in the nation at the time. And she just continued to get better and better. And by her mid-40s, she was a full-on star, not just in duckpin, but in all of Baltimore. And this reign lasts nearly 20 years. The NDBC named her the number one average female duck pinner 13 different times between 1946 and 1965, including 9 of the 10 seasons from the 46-47 season to the 56-57 season. And she was number 2 6 other times. The Baltimore Evening Sun Duckpin Tournament was considered one of the most prestigious events in America, and it was held annually.
There's just so many things in that title that don't exist anymore, and it hurts a little bit.
I'm sorry, James. So this is one of the most prestigious tournaments in all of duckpin bowling, and it was held annually from 1925 to 1968. Toots competed for 22 years from 1942 to 1963, and she won it 12 times. So if she enters, there's a better than 50% chance of her winning this. According to Carton's research, Toots also won the Ladies Chesapeake Open 5 times, the Ladies Baltimore Open twice, and at one point held every single individual women's duckpin world record. The only title that she apparently didn't win was a Pro Tour title, and that's only because the Women's National Duckpin Association didn't start a professional league until 1982, when Toots was already 69, which was 10 years or so after she had stopped bowling competitively. Although it would have been really cool to see a 69-year-old Toots crush all of these 30-year-old professional duckpin bowlers.
Nice. There we go. I was just waiting for you to try and finish your sentence.
I appreciate it. Even though she couldn't bowl competitively anymore, Toots did end up running her own duckpin bowling lane, as you might expect. And she continued to bowl recreationally until she was forced to stop at 82 because of bad knees. At that point, her body just couldn't handle it anymore. Toots was a charter member of the NDBC Hall of Fame in 1961, still active at that point and winning every single year. So it makes sense that they just said, oh, we're not going to wait until she retires. Let's just put her in this first class because she's the best. That same year, she was also elected to the Maryland Sports Athletic Hall of Fame. At that point, she was only the second woman ever elected to that Hall of Fame and the first duckpin bowler. I actually found a nice photo from the Maryland State Athletic Hall of Fame that has a picture of her at Pinland Bowling Lanes in Baltimore, just sitting on the little ball return that's small and thin because the duckpin balls are so much smaller with a bunch of duckpin balls next to her. It's great. It is exactly what you would expect of a probably 80-year-old woman at this point who's just yeah, I know that I'm still great at this. Unfortunately, Toots does die of cancer at the age of 85 in Frederick, Maryland in 1998. In her obituary in the Baltimore Sun, Frederick Rasmussen wrote, "It was said her very presence in a duckpin alley shook the composure of the women who competed against her. Above all, it was an era of sheer brilliance in the clutch, where her competitive spirit, more than anything else, provided the decisive ingredient in the capture of her innumerable titles. Far more often than not, she came from behind, leaving the feeling that she was never out of contention until the last ball was rolled."
I mean, Toots sounds like the Michael Jordan of duckpin bowling.
I think that's probably accurate.
Equally terrifying by the sounds of it.
Right. Like when you talk about the competitive spirit and just by virtue of her presence, other people were shook. Those are the type of things they said about MJ.
And I know exactly what a middle-aged white woman born in Hamilton Hills living in Baltimore in the 1960s would look like. I have a very good picture, man. I'm not even going to look her up. I know what Toots Barger looked like. And I can see how it's terrifying. I can understand how it's terrifying. It's big hair. The hair is large.
It really is. I literally just pulled up a picture.
I'm not looking at it. I just know how fucking big that hair is, man.
Going along those same lines, Carton also interviewed a woman named Joan Corcoran, younger than Toots, but had grown up watching her and then eventually did play against her later in Toots' life. Quote, "Later, as I was bowling in major leagues, I bowled with Toots. I bowled against her in later years in the 60s through the 70s. She was quite a champion. Her form was impeccable. Her follow-through was so impeccable. She was well known because of her ability, natural rankings, her tournament wins. She was the most prominent woman bowler of her day, sort of like Babe Didrikson in the golf world." So we have a Babe reference here. She is the Babe of duckpin bowling. The New York Times, in their obituary, they said that she became such an acclaimed figure that she was regarded as the city's premier athlete until Johnny Unitas came to town. So we have Toots and then Johnny Unitas.
I've had my Baltimore sports Mount Rushmore sewn up for a very long time, and it is making me question some things.
I mean, Toots was so popular and so dominant that Sports Illustrated did a thing of the 50 best athletes in Maryland history, and it's all boxers and football players and baseball players, and then they just throw Toots on at the end. It's like, yep, she was so dominant at this very regional sport that we have to make sure she gets recognized, like, on this list of Hall of Fame baseball players and world champion boxers. One thing I also want to note is that the Smithsonian actually has one of Toots's balls and one of her trophies in collection. So you can just go to the Smithsonian website and see pictures of them. And I love the descriptions because it says, orange bowling ball with Toots in black print. This 1953 rubber bowling ball belonged to Mary Elizabeth Toots Barger, considered one of America's greatest duck pin bowlers. Toots was the top-ranked woman in her sport 13 times between 1947 and 1958. Named for the small light pins that scattered like ducks in flight when hit. Duck pin bowling originated in Baltimore, Maryland in the early 1900s. Although duck pin leagues formed all along the East Coast, the Baltimore-Washington area is still the center of the sport.
I have never once in my life heard that explanation for the pins. I've never heard any explanation. Like, it's as good as any. I don't hate it, but I've never heard that before in my life.
I love the idea that the Smithsonian made that up, but I'd like to think that it did also come from somewhere. I really like duck pin bowling now that I've learned about it, and I can't believe I didn't know about it. I'm also kind of sad because apparently I looked this up, and one of the reasons that duck pin bowling didn't really spread is that one dude who was a submarine designer developed the automatic duck pin bowling pin setter, and it has over 1,000 moving parts. And out of spite, he refused to sell the design to Brunswick, which is the largest 10-pin bowling company. And because he did it out of spite, he could not afford to keep this business going, and they went out of business in 1973. And no one has ever recreated his design. So there have been no new parts for any duck pin like setters for 50 years. And any duck pin lane can only fix broken pin setters by hoping another lane closes and then cannibalizing the parts.
It's a duck-eat-duck world out there.
It is indeed a duck-eat-duck world, and that means we've gone from the 500 lanes in Baltimore alone to, only a handful left, and they're just hoping that they can keep things going, which is sad. And I hope that there's a way that they can figure out something else to fix this eventually, because something as weird and wild as duck pin bowling, something that gives so much regional pride, as I saw in James's face when I first mentioned duck pin bowling.
I fucking love duck pin bowling. Yeah.
Deserves to be around for years to come, just as Toots Barger also deserves to be recognized by our Hall of Guy.
That's great. I mean, are we going to be able to vote all three people in? This is phenomenal.
For you, James, we could do that.
Please, yeah, just talk more about Baltimore. This is great. I forget how much I love people saying nice things about the city. Yeah, that's all I got, man. That's fucking sick. Duck pin bowling rules. It is really sad. There are like a handful, even I think, oversells it a little bit at this point. There's one not far from where we live now since moving. And that's where I've gone for, like I said, 2 birthday parties over a decade apart. And hopefully in another decade it still exists.
I just can't fathom that it's actually like, come on. There's some good schools in Baltimore. There's some engineering schools. Some kid make it your senior thesis like, I'm designing the new duck pin retrieval thing.
You know what? The mayor is an alum of Mergenthaler Vocational Technical High School, which is named for another guy who made a bizarre Byzantine multi-part device that almost no one in the world can fix now. Sorry, we're getting real into the weeds about Baltimore here. I'm trying to keep from going off the rails.
James, do you want to go next, or do you want to bring us home at the end?
I
New
feel
York
like
City.
I think I gotta get the energy out. I don't know if I can keep it in for a whole nother presentation, to be completely honest. I feel like I gotta get some of the Baltimore out.
All right, please go.
Like, because you already, I mean, I was going to talk about the state sport. I was going to talk a little bit about jousting. I was going to talk a tiny bit about walking. But what I want to talk about is what is our official team sport, Diaz, which is lacrosse. You were correct to point that out, because lacrosse does have a deep seat in this area. And it is weird. Like I've said, I never played on any organized team, but we just had some lacrosse sticks in the basement, and a lot of people did, and we just go out and toss the ball in the backyard pretty frequently. And if there is any one person that's really responsible, if not for seeding the fertile ground of Maryland with the lacrosse crops, at the very least being a very, very good early tender and propagator of that strong love for the sport. And he is a person, like I said, is responsible for this as anyone. That guy is Bill Schmeisser. Bill Schmeisser was born William Christian Schmeisser in Baltimore, August 4th, 1880. So we're going even further back than Toots to begin with. But as a teenager, he attends a high school just blocks away from Eastern High, which is unfortunately City College. That is the wrong high school.
Oh no.
It's okay. It is. Here's the I half joke. Like, we do take this rivalry very, very seriously. I'm going to be honest. City's at worst the third best high school in the city. And that's just because Baltimore School for the Arts is weird to categorize. Like, Poly and City are 1 and 2. City is a great school. And Bill Schmeisser does not go far from City College. He goes to Johns Hopkins University. That is Johns Hopkins. They're on 33rd Street, just like City College. He's on the Homewood campus, and this had been founded only 20 years before at this point. It's still a very early college, founded right around the same time that Bill had been born. And it is the first European-style research institution in the States. This means that it is a bunch of nerds. It has been a bunch of nerds since it was created. It was a bunch of nerds when I was growing up. It was a bunch of nerds when my sister went there. It's still a bunch of nerds now. Sport's not really all that important. Hopkins nowadays plays D3 in everything except for lacrosse, in which they are a D1 powerhouse. And that has been the case forever. Like, even back at this time, they are not in any kind of like competitive sport. And I will also say one thing real quick before we move on. They are dominant in things like D3 baseball and football. They're very, very good at those sports in D3. But they've always been very, very good at lacrosse at the highest level. So Bill Schmeisser is not going to come in to some like podunk team, even though this team is not even yet the Johns Hopkins Blue Jays. They're just the Johns Hopkins men's lacrosse team. But he is going to come in to this 3-time ILA, Intercollegiate Lacrosse Association champion at the time. This is one of 2 leagues that's kind of existing around here, along with the USIULL, the U.S. Inter-University Lacrosse League. And they've got all the top schools. They've got Hopkins, Harvard, Cornell, Princeton, NYU, Columbia, Penn, Lehigh University, Stevens Technical University. A couple weird ones there at the end that sneak in, much like with college hockey. But Hopkins, like I said, among the very best of them. Schmeisser's first season, 1900, he's a defenseman on the team. Goes 6-1, they're ILA champs, and they have defeated one of the 2 co-champs of the USIULL, neither of which have a winning record anyway. So they claim the 1900 Natty. 1901, he's again on the team, but they pull out of the ILA tournament despite a 6-1 record because of some violent play from some Stevens Tech players. Ends up there's only one ILA game. It's Stevens over Lehigh that year. Like, the highest level in college in this one season was Stevens Tech and Lehigh University. It was the only game. And then again, just a strange vestige of this sport being so very regional. 1902. We are back. Schmeisser is at the helm as a senior in more ways than one because he is a team captain and a co-coach along a friend of his, Ronald T. Abercrombie, who unfortunately does not have anything to do with Abercrombie and Fitch. I was really hoping that was going to be the case. Once again, Hopkins goes 6-1, wins the ILA. Cornell had won the USIULL. They did not have a head-to-head matchup. Hopkins did have a better record. They both claimed the title. And then later that year, June, they play University of Toronto for an unofficial international championship. Unfortunately, I could not find the result for this anywhere, but nevertheless, I am very excited for them because also this does mean that they beat a team that was going by the Blue Jays at that time in Toronto. He gets his BA at this point. It is just like a Bachelor of Arts, doesn't even major in anything. It is just a Bachelor of Arts degree because it's 1903.
I kind of love that. I'm trying to, like, what classes would you even take to get that?
I think it basically is like a blanket liberal arts degree now, as we would call it. But yeah, just Bachelor of Arts. He's the only coach this year when they go to a 4-2 record that is still good enough for his third ILA title as a player or coach at this time. And then he steps away from Hopkins for a little bit. It's 1904, and he has two pursuits with which we are concerned. One is with American Sports Publishing Company. This was an arm of Albert Spalding, who is of the Spalding Company. And they put out this thing called Spalding Athletic Library, which was these pamphlets for like 50 years from the 1890s to 1940s that basically were the rules for sports that were being invented at the time. So this is like where the first basketball rules get published for a lot of people. And in 1904, it is the company that publishes a book authored by Bill Schmeisser and edited by Ronald Abercrombie, his buddy, called Lacrosse from Candidate to Team, which for like half a century is the book on lacrosse. So Bill Schmeisser did write the book on lacrosse in 1904. He also, as like sports professionalism is growing, it's not growing for lacrosse. Like baseball's taken off, football's taken off, lacrosse is going to stay amateur. And so he helps found this amateur athletic club called the Mount Washington Club, which we will come back to later, but it's going to be a very important amateur lacrosse club in the domestic lax world. And then 1905, Schmeisser finds himself back at Hopkins, getting a graduate degree in political economy. No fucking clue what that means. This is two just nothing degrees that he has.
It means he is qualified to run the Fed, and that's it.
I think this class was taught by Vincent Adultman.
Well, he's back in Vincent Adultman's classroom. He is also back on the sidelines. They only go 3-2-1, and they do not get to the ILA championship in the last year of the ILA's existence before coming the US ILA. 1906, he's got things going all over the city, but he is still at Hopkins and goes 6-0, winning the first ever US ILA title. Mount Washington at this point also drops all sports that they had as an amateur athletic club except for lacrosse. So they are now just the Mount Washington Lacrosse Club. On a personal note, he is studying at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, which is the oldest University of Maryland school. It is a little bit older than the state College Park one. I was about to say State College. That's Penn State. Fuck that shit.
Wait, there's a UMB and a UMBC?
Yes, that's University of Maryland, Baltimore County, which is different than Baltimore.
Oh my God.
Which we will stress forever. So that's where he graduates from law school in 1907. And he's still working with Mount Washington, and he's still coaching at Hopkins, who go 5-1 and win another USILA title, his fourth as a coach and fifth overall. And if this sounds like a full plate, know that he is very, very firm about one thing with all of his coaching. He will not get paid for any of it. He will never receive a paycheck. He believes very firmly that, like, look, I'm making money as a lawyer on the side. That is my job. This is my amateur passion. And so he will, for all of his exploits with Mount Washington and Johns Hopkins, receive absolutely no money, despite the fact that the coaching career continues in 1908 with an 8-1 record and yet another USILA title with Schmeisser roaming the sidelines. 1909, Hopkins comes back and only drops one game. They're 6-1, and they win yet another title. They have won every single Southern Division USILA title during its existence to this point. And while both the Northern Division and Southern Division claim quote-unquote national titles, every single head-to-head that they have had versus a Northern Division winner during this period has been a win for Hopkins. So in his 3 years as a player and 6 as a coach, just coach, because he's got the one overlap one, he has a 50-10-1 record with 7 total titles, an unimpeachable tenure that is, for now, going to come to an end. He focuses more on practicing law for a while, spends a lot more time in the Mount Washington Club, who, again, are like going on barnstorming games often against a lot of the top college teams and doing very well, but they are just an amateur club, so there's no higher competition for them to win. And he also never really stops thinking about college sports, so he goes and he writes another book in 1913 called Are You Going to College? And the PDF for this book, I should mention, just like the stuff in the Spalding Library, is fully available at the Library of Congress. And I didn't read a lot of it, but I did read the table of contents. And I do want to share a couple of highlights from the table of contents with you guys. Cut the short pants. Father's ability to foot bills. College hazing. The female seminary as a neighbor. Be Johnny on the spot. How to beat the instructor. And is the other fellow always, in quotes, the mucker?
I don't know what that means, but I'm sure it's important.
Yeah, did not read any further, just did enjoy the table of contents for his second published work. During this time, he and a bunch of his past students are also responsible for the growth of two other major area powers in the college lacrosse game. So while he's not necessarily hands-on at these schools, he is kind of providing a guiding hand in the area, as in 1908, some former Hopkins players go to Navy and set up a team there at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, our state's beautiful capital. They lose their first ever game to Hopkins and have the growth of their program then stalled by World War I. But eventually, by the 1920s, they are a national power. And in the 20s is also when a school that had been a club team since 1895, the school formerly known as the Maryland Agricultural College, but had only just now graduated to varsity status. In their first year, this time known as Maryland State College, now University of Maryland, graduates to varsity status. They beat the University of Navy to end a 46-game win streak, and they also, late in that season, beat undefeated Johns Hopkins. And on hand to see the growth of this game here in the state is none other than Hopkins head coach Bill Schmeisser, who was returned to the sidelines here in the 1920s. He gets there in 23 initially, goes 6-2 that year, and then the next year, 7-2 with one of those two losses being to the University of Maryland. He is also jostling for the record Syracuse and Army as the other two powers that have kind of risen up at this time. But both of those years were good enough for two more titles. And in 1925, he comes back one more time. The team is still good enough to go 6-3, but Maryland is actually a team to win their first ever national title that year. And this is his last ever year coaching a Hopkins team. Though I do believe at this point, one thing I want to point out, they seem to be called the Blue Jays at this point, so he does get to be a Blue Jays coach for a little bit. That was coming from stuff from the school student humor paper, the black and blue, and then the J just because Johns Hopkins. So he does finish as a Blue Jays coach. He does have one final hurrah in 1928. Goes with the team to Amsterdam because they are representing the United States in Olympic demonstrations there. It is a round robin between the US, Canada, and the UK. Everybody finishes 1-1. It's a tie. Everyone's unhappy.
But if you look at the goal differential, USA finishes +2, Canada finishes +1, Great Britain finished -3, I think.
Yeah.
So therefore, if we go to gold differential, he is a gold medalist in an exhibition where they don't give any medals and they don't really care who wins or loses. But
Yeah.
we can claim it.
We can claim it. Let's give it to him. He will come back with that. He'll continue to support the sport and youth athletics up until his death in 1941 at Union Memorial Hospital, which is literally in between City College and Johns Hopkins on 33rd Street. Mount Washington will follow and continue to hold up his legacy, being the premier lacrosse club in the world at that level, highlighted by a 1976 World Lacrosse Championship for the United States. Hopkins will eventually go back to the Olympics in 32, and they've remained the best college program. They have 44 total titles, even in the midst of a current drought since 2007. In 1957, Schmeisser is inducted into the inaugural Lacrosse Hall of Fame class, which is when the Lacrosse Hall of Fame is still located on Hopkins campus next to Homewood Field, where he coached and played. And then the last kind of honor that he got in 1942, just the year after his death. The USILA began presenting every year the Schmeisser Award, which was annually given to the nation's top defensemen. And I want to go through real quick the schools that have won the most of those. In third place, you've got a tie, both Army and Maryland's Navy, with 9. Second place, it is University of Maryland with 10. First place with 17 winners, Johns Hopkins University, the alma mater of one Bill Schmeisser, my lacrosse Baltimore guy this week.
Always have to shout out Johns Hopkins and lacrosse if we're talking about Baltimore. Hard to do worse than the guy who wrote the book on lacrosse and was at all parts of Baltimore and even took on other nations on behalf of Baltimore. I like the idea that...
Now, to be fair, what they all point, he wasn't in all parts. He found one spot, like one 5-block radius based around where he would eventually die, and just chilled in that spot for like 40 years.
You know, I respect that too.
I mean, he mastered it. He mastered his 5 blocks. He was the best that he could be within his 5 blocks. Why would he leave his 5 blocks?
Speaking as a resident of those 5 blocks. It's a fine 5 blocks.
I also, just because of that, I looked up the Johns Hopkins history of success in lacrosse. Did you know there's only been 4 seasons in which they did not make the NCAA tournament, and 3 of them are within the past 12 years.
Here's the thing that Maryland will now try and hold over Hopkins, because Hopkins has sprinkled in there 1 or 2 losing seasons. Maryland, since they became varsity, have never posted a losing season. This state is very good at lacrosse. Because that's the other fun thing about Maryland lacrosse is all of these guys on Hopkins, Maryland, Loyola is in there too. All of these teams, they're guys that have played in high school and middle school and elementary school. They've played against one another in this state on these same fields for some exhibition games their whole lives. And now they're just doing it at what will be the highest level for many of them.
I would love an all-star game that's just Maryland versus First Nations.
I think I got to give it to the First Nations people. I had to think about it for a moment. I really had to consider it. But that is just too white of a team to take them down. There's too many Blakes. There's too many Blakes on the Maryland team to possibly take them down. Too many Blakes. Diaz, speaking of things...
Do you have a white guy from Maryland for us?
Yeah. I don't think you do.
Well, before we get to my guy, I do want to shout out another white guy because, again, looking at the Johns Hopkins history of coaches, shout out Don Zimmerman. He is the play-by-play for our high school lacrosse package that we do. He was the head coach at Hopkins. I believe he won 3 national titles. So just before we move on, I just wanted to shout that out.
Get a statement from him next time based on what this goes for Bill Schmeisser. Let's see what his take on Bill Schmeisser getting in or not getting in is.
I'll have to ask him about it. I'm sure Don will have some good takes. Who I do want to talk about this week, he's not a white guy. He's a different kind of guy. We'll get into it. I'm making this sound a little nefarious, but what I think is impressive about this guy is when you look at certain sports, there's certain advantages that just immediately put you at a higher level, right? If it's weightlifting, if you're stronger, you're going to be better. If it's track and field, if you're faster, you're going to be better. And with a sport like basketball, if you're taller, you're going to be better.
If you're Zach Edey, you're guaranteed a college scholarship no matter what.
There is some crazy statistic that's 20% of 7-footers in America go on to get a collegiate scholarship for basketball. It's something insane like that. But no, the guy I want to talk about is on the complete opposite side of that spectrum. And if you're going to overcome those kind of disadvantages, you're going to have to be extremely tough. You're going to have to be extremely skilled. And the guy I want to talk about overcame a lot of challenges off the court and on the court to succeed in his career, eventually make it into the NBA, despite being the shortest player in the history of the league, standing just 5'3". I want to talk about Tyrone Bogues, but you know him better as Muggsy.
Everyone's favorite Space Jam co-star.
No,
I don't know if I can say that. Patrick Ewing was in that movie.
Patrick Ewing was good, but Patrick Ewing wasn't a good actor. Muggsy Bogues on the therapist couch, but I love my mama. That's the best line that any of them delivered.
All right, good timing.
Some conflicting reports as to whether or not Muggsy ever did make it up to Slam and Jam while playing on those Baltimore courts. He got close. He was born January 9th, 1965 in the Charm City. And before he was known as Muggsy, he actually had a different nickname. Kept a high, tight cut as a child, also into his playing career. It's kind of the only haircut he's ever had. But when he was a kid, it made his head shiny. So his family would call him Apple because his head shined like an apple.
That's the first shiny thing your head goes to. Okay, Apple, sure.
We'll take it. But from a very early age, it's a tough upbringing. He grew up in the Lafayette housing projects, and violence and vices kind of just abound. 5 years old, he hears a commotion, so he pokes his head around the corner. Somebody has a shotgun, and they shoot it at somebody else, and the buckshots go wild, and Muggsy Bogues gets shot by one of the buckshots. He has to go to the hospital. He ends up being fine. You might wonder, did getting shot contribute to his height? He was kind of destined to not be very tall to begin with. His mom was only 4'10". His dad was 5'5", so it could have impacted. He was probably always going to be that short. By the time he was 7, he's already earning a reputation on the basketball court. He's often the youngest on the court, also obviously always the smallest on the court, but he commanded a strong presence. He knew that being shorter, you basically have two options. You can just back down and accept that you're not going to be able to defend, or you can be the most fucking tenacious, little annoying piece of shit guard that you can possibly be. And that's kind of what he is. He's also that off the court. He once convinced his entire kindergarten class to play hooky, to go to the basketball courts and play together. He's a bit of a leader. And among some of the older kids, one of their favorite shows growing up was called The Bowery Boys. And The Bowery Boys is actually a collection of films that was made. The Bowery Boys are kind of just this group of kids. They're a little bit like hoodlums, but, they have fun. And the leader of the group was the shortest kid. His name was Muggs. So at 7 years old, Tyrone Bogues becomes Muggs, which quickly becomes Muggsy. At first, he doesn't like it. It sticks to the point that teachers are even calling him Muggsy by the time he gets to high school. Quickly became a playground legend, but before he got to high school, more family troubles hit. When he's 12 years old, his father gets charged and convicted for an armed robbery. He has to go to jail for 20 years. And his older brother, Chucky, is starting to get into hard drugs. He forms an addiction. And with these troubles developing, sports become an even bigger outlet for him. When he gets to high school, he spends his first 2 years at Southern. But after those first 2 years, partly because he wants to be a dental technician, partly because there's the opportunity to form something very special at Dunbar, he transfers in to Dunbar to be a poet. The Poets are the name of the Dunbar athletics teams. And he's going there to be coached by the legendary Baltimore coach, Bob Wade. Bob Wade played in Baltimore, but not for the Bullets. He played for the Colts under Don Shula. And eventually in his coaching career, he went on to coach University of Maryland as well. So a legend who certainly deserves mentioning in this story of Muggsy Bogues. A fun thing about Dunbar and about Bob Wade's coaching methods is being an inner city school, funds are pretty light. You got to get creative. And they didn't have a gym for any kind of weightlifting. So what he did instead is every kind of drill that you would have to do as a basketball player, whether it's, like full court sprints, shuffles, doing a box drill, something like that. They just always did it while holding bricks in both of their hands. And sometimes they had to hold them over their heads. Sometimes they just had to hold them in general. But they always had to do everything with bricks in their hands. The theory Bob Wade had was if you get used to going through practice with these bricks in your hands, you're going to feel like Superman when you're actually on the court during a game. This ends up working out and ends up developing some incredible talent at Dunbar in this time. There are a total of 11 players from this time that Muggsy transfers in junior year that go on to play under scholarship at Division I. In addition to Muggsy, there were 3 more future NBA players on this team. You had David Wingate, the senior, but then fellow juniors were Reggie Williams and Reggie Lewis. This is probably the greatest high school team of all time. And that's even
strike the probably, baby. This is the greatest high school basketball team of all time.
Well, because you also got to consider, as compared to your modern day, IMG Academy and all of these schools that are set up to recruit nationally and to bring people in. These are all kids that grew up within about a 5-block radius of each other. Junior year, they go 29-0. They win the state title. Senior year, they're getting some talk as far as being a good team nationally. So what they do is they schedule a national schedule. They go 31-0. again undefeated, ranked number 1 in the nation by any poll that does anything with high school basketball. And not only are the Poets succeeding on the basketball court like this, Muggsy Bogues is also a standout on the wrestling and baseball teams. It's really not hard to imagine wrestling. I don't think you would have to teach him any technique. Just the fact that he is as fucking ripped as he is at his size.
I'm just a little guy. But also ripped, yes. Also ripped from holding bricks up constantly.
If you look at the high school team photos of obviously these 4 guys that go into the NBA, everybody knew how good they were. There's a lot of photos of them together. With Reggie Williams, Reggie Lewis, and David Wingate, you're like, oh, I can see once they fill out, this is going to be an NBA body. They're just a little skinny right now. Muggsy is already like chiseled as fuck in high school. Like it's nuts. Like people used to call Doug Martin in football muscle hamster. Like Muggsy Bogues is the OG muscle hamster. Absolutely fucking shredded. It's nuts.
Diaz, real quick. I was curious, so I looked it up. The 2019-2020 Montverde Academy team in Florida had Cade Cunningham, Scotty Barnes, Derek Whitehead, Moses Moody, Caleb Houston, Ryan Nebhard. 7 NBA players, plus 2 more that are still in college that could go to the NBA, which I think is insane.
Poets in 5. Poets in 5.
Cade's too used to losing now with Detroit, so he doesn't have that dog in him anymore.
He has no winning DNA. Fucking Muggsy Bogues would steal his lunch money, dude. He would have no chance. And the fact that this team was so successful, I think, is what really contributes to Muggsy Bogues being taken seriously as a college prospect. Because we've seen it before. We've talked about it before on the show with a guy like Akil Carr. He was good. The team wasn't necessarily that great. Granted, there's also some self-sabotage in there, but he doesn't quite get the same level of interest from recruiting as Muggsy Bogues ends up getting. He gets offers from Virginia, Seton Hall, Penn State even, but what he ultimately decides to do is go to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and join the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. When he gets there, not an immediate starter, but his freshman year as the backup, he averages just under 10 minutes a game, puts up modest numbers. The team makes it to the Elite Eight. They lose 68-63 to Houston. Over the summer, he goes back to Baltimore, plays in an alumni game at Dunbar, and Reggie Lewis introduces him to a woman by the name of Kim, who he ends up starting a relationship with. When he comes back for his sophomore year, he's now the starting point guard, averages 6.6 points a game and 7.1 assists a game. Also, 2.9 steals a game, which is pretty nuts. The fact that he averages 2.4 rebounds a game, also just like impressive to me that he gets 2.4 rebounds a game. But then also, if you think, it was measured at 44 inches.
Fuck, man, that's how he's getting rebounds.
44 is pretty damn good. So he's getting up there, but then, I mean, so with the 2.9 steals and the 2.4 rebounds, he is securing possession by literally taking it from the person in front of him more than he is doing it by getting a missed shot. Pretty insane to put in perspective how good he was as a defensive guard. Leads Wake Forest to a 15-14 record. They don't qualify for NCAA, but they make it to the NIT. They lose to USF in the first round. As a junior, similar to what we talked about with Andre Miller, he's shouldering more of the offensive load himself. So he goes up to 11.3 points a game, 8.4 assists a game, 3.1 steals a game to go with 3.1 boards a game. And you'd think with these numbers, Muggsy's killing it. The team's got to be doing well too. They go 0-14 in the ACC this year and 8-21 overall. Pretty bad year.
Damn.
In spite of that, Muggsy's being recognized regardless. 2 honorifics that he gets. First of all, he wins the Naismith Award this year, but not the Naismith for the best player in the nation. He wins the Frances Pomeroy Naismith Award. That's named for Dr. Naismith's daughter-in-law, and it rewards the best players in the men's and women's game who overcome their lack of height to succeed.
It's a little guy award.
It's specifically just for...
And they made it the same name. That's so mean.
I mean, yeah, they could have called it the Francis, but I think the Frances Pomeroy Naismith sounds a little better. So yeah, it's 6 feet and under for men, 5'8" and under for women. So notable winners on the men's side, you got Tim Hardaway, You got Earl Boykins, another little guy. You got banned from the Hall, Nate Robinson. And you have current Virginia coach Tony Bennett, who won it for his time at Wisconsin Green Bay. By the way, Tony Bennett's middle name, Guy. Something to come back to, something to keep in mind. On the women's side, the inaugural winner of the Frances Pomeroy Naismith Award on the women's side is Kim Mulkey.
I'm going to say I'm pretty sure Becky Hammond has one of these. Does she not?
Becky Hammond does have one. You
Yeah.
also got Jen Rosati. You've also got Courtney Vandersloot.
Sorry, we have to get rid of it now, though. If Kim Mulkey wins the award the same year,
Well, Xavier, I've got some good news for you then, because the award was discontinued after the 2013-14 season. So it's been 10 years since we have crowned the Frances Pomeroy Naismith Award winner. But in that hallowed history, Muggsy Bogues among the venerated. He also, in this offseason, is named to the U.S. national team as a starting point guard. So for the 1986 FIBA Championships, he goes over to represent his country. He leads the team in both assists and steals as they go on to win the gold. Some other players on this team worth shouting out. You got Kenny Smith. You got Rony Sekeli. You got Derek McKee. And you also got not one, not two, but three Spurs legends, James. Steve Kerr,
Okay.
Sean Elliott,
Ooh.
and the Admiral.
Ooh. All right. Maryland legend. Navy.
And yeah, David Robinson led the team in scoring. But Muggsy Bogues leads in assists and steals en route to that gold. And on the back of this, Muggsy is coming back to campus senior year with some momentum. He's going to average 14.8 points a game. He's going to average 9.5 assists a game. His steals fall off a little bit, 2.4, but his rebounds go up to 3.8. Wake still struggles this year. They enter the ACC tournament at 13-14, and they know, much like NC State, as we mentioned earlier, if they want to get into the tournament, they're going to have to go on a run. Starts off by upsetting the 2-seed Clemson Tigers, and they take NC State to 1 overtime. They take NC State to 2 overtimes, and they lose despite Muggsy dropping 29 in the loss. This ends Muggsy Bogues' collegiate career, but he does graduate as not only the program leader in all-time assists and steals, he is also the ACC leader in both of those categories when he graduates. And I believe the steals still holds up. I think the assist has been taken, but I think he still has steals. We're now at the summer of 1987. This is a busy one for Muggsy. First of all, he and Kim have their first kid together. They have a daughter named Brittany. And Muggsy finds himself playing professional basketball, but not right into the NBA. The USBL, United States Basketball League, ran on a schedule that's roughly similar to what the WNBA does now, mostly a summer league. So if a player wanted to double dip, they could. There's still some questions about how Muggsy's going to look in a professional setting, so he takes the opportunity to go play for the Rhode Island Gulls when they take him 2nd overall. He didn't even go 1st overall in the USBL draft. Can't find who's the number 1 pick.
Damn.
But there's some guys on the 20th anniversary team for this, at least. You got Manu Pohl. You got Adrian Griffin, former Bucks head coach. You got Avery Johnson, Spurs legend. You got Anthony Mason, Knicks legend. Spud Webb is an honorable mention.
Spud Webb is very good.
Gotta love a little guy. Ime Udoka played in this league. Roy Jones Jr. played in this league.
Ooh.
Oh my God. World Be Free. Jamario Moon. Cheryl Miller played. Damn, dude, the USBL fucks. We might have to do a deep dive on it at some point.
But for now, we dive deeper into the professional career, the USBL career still of Bogues here.
Yeah, so we get to start with the Rhode Island Gulls. He averages 22.4 points and 8.4 assists. Proves that doesn't matter, professional level, he's going to be able to compete. He does roll his ankle, decides to get out before like a more serious injury occurs, and he pulls himself out of the league and puts his full focus into the NBA draft. In the 1987 NBA draft, he goes 12th overall to the Washington Bullets. Goes 6 picks ahead of Mark Jackson, who went 18th. Goes 10 picks ahead of his former teammate Reggie Lewis, goes 22nd to the Celtics. Reggie Williams, his other former teammate, goes 4th to the Suns, which made Dunbar High School the first high school ever to have 3 players drafted in the first round in the same year.
Hell yeah. Go Baltimore. We
Go Baltimore.
we have the Engineers and the Poets, which is a very great matchup. We have rivalry. But we all do kind of claim this Dunbar class citywide for our own pride. And they should. They're generous with it.
And look, generous with their logo. I love that they have just appropriated our Temple Owls identity, as they should. I take it as a sign of respect. Xavier might feel differently. But right now, Muggsy Bogues is in the NBA, folks. He's 5'3", and what he's got when he goes to the Washington Bullets is he's got a 7'7" teammate by the name of Manute Bol. This team had both the shortest and the tallest players in the history of the NBA on the same roster at the same time. 28 inches separating them. Obviously, this gets a lot of headlines. They get that famous SI cover. Muggsy, instantly pretty successful despite coming off the bench. He leads the team in both assists and steals, and the Bullets get the 7 seed. They go down 2-0 to the Pistons, who are obviously the class of the East at this point. They win both of their home games. They force a decisive Game 5 back in Detroit, but they lose it as Detroit goes on the way to winning the Eastern Conference title that year, though they did lose to the Lakers in the finals that year. The next offseason, the NBA is undergoing expansion. The Charlotte Hornets and the Miami Heat are coming into the fold. And despite the fact that they just invested their first-round pick in them, the Wizards don't protect Muggsy Bogues. And so he goes to Charlotte, where he becomes a founding member of the Charlotte Hornets. And he very quickly becomes a pretty big fan favorite. Makes a lot of good friends on the team. His best friend on the team was Del Curry, father of Steph, and also Larry Grandmama Johnson, one of his good friends on the team. One of the fun things about this team is, as they're kind of just thrown together, people don't believe him when they say that Muggsy isn't just his name. When oh no, my name's actually Tyrone. People don't believe him. Everybody calls him by Muggsy, except for Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson actually called him Billy.
Now, where's that one coming from, Larry?
That comes from the fact that Muggsy's father's nickname was Billy, but Muggsy's father's real name was Richard. But everybody called him Billy. This is very much in line with what they just say about the Baltimore, specifically the Lafayette projects that they come from, is nobody went by their actual name. Everybody had a nickname.
Sure.
So, but yeah, for the fact that, his name's Richard, but everybody calls him Billy. At least Muggsy has an origin story. His first season in Charlotte, second as a pro. He's mostly coming off the bench, but he is a steadying force. He's bringing constant energy anytime he comes on. Building his ties in the Charlotte community. He can feel like this is going to be where he's going to be able to settle his roots. After this first year in Charlotte, he marries Kim. And now that they're ready to call Charlotte their home and to go forward. By year 2, he is a regular starter for the Charlotte Hornets. He never quite gets to the scoring heights that we saw in the USBL. He's never going to be a 20-point-a-game scorer. But in this first full season as a starter, he averages 9.4 points and 10.7 assists to go with 1.7 steals against only 1.5 turnovers a game. So very efficient. Take the ball from you. Will not give it up himself. Finds his guys in his spots. In 1991, so after this first full season as a starter, the team is still trying to build their fan base, so there's going to be some wacky promotions. So he and Del Curry are going to sign with the Gastonia Rangers, they being the local minor league baseball team, closest one to Charlotte. Muggsy, as we mentioned, played at Dunbar, very good baseball player. Starts at second base, goes 0 for 2, but didn't strike out on either of them. 2 balls in play from Muggsy.
That's not bad for presumably a pretty long layover.
Right. I'm assuming he didn't play at all since high school. So step in, put the ball in play. That's all we can ask. And going into the 92-93 season, Muggsy sees how great it is in Charlotte. He wants to bring some of his friends. So he gets David Wingate to sign. And the two who started next to each other for those Dunbar Poets, now they start next to each other for the Charlotte Hornets in the NBA. I cannot even imagine how fucking cool that would be. to be able to start next to the same guy you started with in high school. Riding these brotherly vibes, the Hornets are a surprise team. Muggsy averages 10 points a game, 8.8 assists, 2 steals against just 1.9 turnovers. With that 8.8 assists to 1.9 turnovers, he has the best assist-to-turnover ratio in the entire NBA for this season. And he leads the Hornets to the first playoff appearance in franchise history. As the 5 seed, they're going against the 4 seed Boston Celtics. And once you know this, Muggsy Bogues, David Wingate are going against their former high school teammate, Reggie Lewis. What an incredible story this is.
Both more and less cool now.
Well, I mean, Reggie Lewis starts off this game 1 on fire. In the first 3 minutes, he scores 10 points. But then when he's coming back down the other way, kind of just stumbles, kind of falls over. They take him out of the game, claims it's not a knee injury. It's nothing like that. They ask him, like, how's your heart feel? He says his heart feels fine. Comes back out to start the second half, gets another couple of buckets, starts feeling his heart again, and Reggie Lewis pulls himself out of this game. Celtics hold on to win that game 1, but Reggie Lewis, after more tests are run, he's held out of the rest of the series. The Hornets take the next 3 games, and they win that first round series 3-1. Next round, they go up against your Knicks, Xavier, and your Knicks kick the shit out of the Hornets, and they win the series in 5, 4-1. This is a season of unprecedented heights on the court for Muggsy Bogues. Great successes, and it's followed by a summer of heartbreak. First of all, Reggie Lewis, after starting off that game so well, and then having this weird thing where he doesn't quite pass out, but he falls over, he gets a lot more tests run in the offseason, and what they determined is that he had cardiac myopathy, and he basically would need a pacemaker to even consider playing again, but largely his playing career is probably over. He goes and gets a second opinion. The second opinion completely disagrees. The second opinion says, this is a normal heart. There's nothing wrong with this heart.
Find a new slant.
Find a new slant. He can do anything that he wants. There's nothing wrong. Don't need a pacemaker. Now that Reggie Lewis has heard what he wanted to hear, he goes back to full intensity training, and on July 27th, 1993, he passes out while training at Brandeis. He's rushed to the hospital where he's pronounced dead. The autopsy confirms that he did have cardiac myopathy due to a viral infection. This doesn't stop people from starting rumors that it was due to drug abuse. This is a few years after the whole Len Bias thing happened. So people are maybe more keenly aware of that kind of thing. Everybody from that Dunbar Poets team, anybody that played with Reggie Lewis in college, they all say, we partied, Reggie didn't. He didn't do that shit. Again, the autopsy, no evidence of drug use, plenty of evidence of this being due to a viral infection, which is very unfortunate, but Muggsy loses his former teammate, Reggie Lewis. He also loses his father to pneumonia in August of this year. And this is pneumonia related to drug abuse because after he got out of jail, he linked back up with Chucky, Muggsy's older brother, and they started abusing drugs together. Dad fell down the path. Dad unfortunately passes away. After this, Muggsy could be very angry at Chucky, right? What he does instead is that he brings Chucky into his home and tries to give him a stable place to be and to get clean. By all accounts, this worked. Chucky, as of the most recent writing in 2022, still sober, still living with Muggsy. You know, good on Muggsy for reaching out and being truly his brother's keeper in that moment. Back to the basketball court. For 93-94, Muggsy averages a double-double, 10.8 points, 10.1 assists. The Hornets do not make the playoffs. Comes back the next year, 94-95. Averages a career-best 11.1 points a game, 8.7 assists a game, to go with 1.3 steals. And this is the end of a 6-year stretch for Muggsy as a starter for the Hornets, in which he finishes in the top 10 in the league in assists in each of those 6 years. In only one of those 6 years did he finish outside the top 4. So consistently one of the best table setters in the NBA throughout this time. There's one iconic moment from the 95 playoffs that I want to talk about. The Hornets get the Bulls in the first round. This is Michael Jordan making his return from baseball back to basketball. There's a lot of meme culture that says that Michael Jordan said to Muggsy Bogues in this series, "Shoot it, you fucking midget." And I quote, that is what the internet says. There's no evidence of that. But there is one play that comes to mind where this kind of thing comes into play a little bit. They get matched up on each other as the Bulls are coming down on offense, and Michael immediately calls for a clear out to be able to ISO in the post on Muggsy. This is me trying to read lips. This has never been in a quote that has been directly found, but I read Michael Jordan's lips as saying, "I'm taking your little ass into the post," and Muggsy says, "Bring it." Michael tries to back him down straight away. Doesn't do very well. Goes to spin back baseline. Muggsy beats him there. Muggsy gets the steal. And for some reason, unbeknownst to me, the refs call a defensive 3 seconds. There was nobody in the key. This was just the refs and David Stern covering for Michael Jordan because nobody could accept the fact that Muggsy Bogues just stole that shit clean from him. A terrible injustice. Maybe that is why he ultimately then invites Muggsy to come onto that Space Jam film. Who knows?
Wrongs.
He might have felt bad about it. But coming off of this season, Muggsy seems to be reaching his prime. The Hornets are seeming to be a consistent playoff threat at this point. But he has to get arthroscopic knee surgery after this 95 season. And to a normal-sized NBA player, this could be a serious detriment. To a player at 5'3" who's only able to be in the NBA because of how explosive of an athlete as they are, this could be even worse. The whole next season, Muggsy only plays 6 games. And when he comes back for the 96-97 season, still doesn't look great. He does reclaim his starting job, but he only averages 8 points a game, 7 assists. Still has to miss 17 games due to recovery from that knee injury. And the Hornets are starting to see the writing on the wall. They have a new coach the following offseason. Dave Cohen suggests, hey, maybe you should retire. Muggsy kind of balks at that. A week later, the team signs David Wesley with the clear idea that he'll be the new starting point guard. The ultimate kiss of death is that Muggsy goes to the owner, George Shinn, and basically says, like, look, I want to be a Hornet for life. And the owner says, of course, we would never trade you, Muggsy Bogues. You are a Hornet for life. You're such an icon in this franchise. We will not trade you to the Golden State Warriors, except in November, they trade him to the Golden State Warriors.
He just had his fingers behind his back while telling him that.
Mm-hmm.
You knew, exactly. Yeah, listen, technically, best kind of correct, right? Plays 2 seasons with those Warriors. In the first, plays in 58 games, but he leads the team in assists despite missing 24. The next year is that lockout shortened season, and Muggsy struggles a lot, doesn't really get to see the court much, if at all. Obviously, because of the lockout. Also, he has the knee problems. Also, he has the hamstring problems. Also, he gets chicken pox for the first time in his life, which, very famously, the older you are when you first get it, the worse it can be. He ends up being fine, makes a full recovery. The next offseason, he's a free agent, and he wants to reunite with his favorite teammate ever in Charlotte, Del Curry. So he signs with the Toronto Raptors. For the 99-2000 season, he finds new health. He plays in 80 of the 82 games. First time playing in 80 games, the 92-93 season. Plays 22 minutes a game in a backup role, 5.1 points, 3.7 assists. He does get a rare start in March going against the Boston Celtics, where he sets a career high with 24 points. That is his career high in points in a Toronto victory. After this, though, all of the kind of injury chickens come home to roost, for lack of a better term. Everything kind of just catches up to him all at once. He only plays in 3 games, and he gets traded mid-season to the New York Knicks. Becomes a New York Knicks legend, except he's really just included in this trade as kind of a salary thing. Never reports to New York, never plays a single game for them.
I think that keeps him from being a New York legend. He's a legend in many other ways.
But not a Knicks legend.
I don't think he could be a Knicks legend.
It's fair.
Fair. He's in the transaction log. That's all I'm saying. He actually makes 2 appearances in that transaction log for the New York Knicks, because the following offseason, they trade him to the Dallas Mavericks. Again, this is largely a salary thing, but Muggsy is kind of ambivalent on this point if he wants to try to come back and play again. There are 3 years left on his contract, which is like pretty insane to give to a person of his age. He's 37 by this point. He was 35 when he signed the contract. The fact that they gave him 5 years at age 35 with knee problems at 5'3", pretty insane. When he gets traded to the Mavericks, New York is one thing for somebody who's based in Baltimore, but to go all the way to Dallas is going to be really tough for Muggsy because he is dealing with some family issues at this point. His mom has recently been diagnosed with cancer as of this trade, and Muggsy tells Mark Cuban, like, look, I understand you just traded for me. I need to retire. I need to be with my mom. And Mark Cuban, in a show of respect, says, don't retire, not just yet. I'm going to waive you first because of a technicality with the NBA salary cap. If Muggsy Bogues retires with years left on his contract, he does not get that money. However, if the Mavericks waive him, he is then owed his entire contract at that moment and can then retire and still get all of the money. So, good guy Mark Cuban. Didn't have to do it. He did it as a show of respect for Muggsy and obviously the impact that he had on the game. So Muggsy gets to go back and be with his mom. Unfortunately, she did pass away that same year. But shout out Mark Cuban, doing the right thing, allowing Muggsy to get his money and then still spend that time with his mother at the end. Since his retirement, Muggsy Bogues has still been very active. First of all, in real estate immediately after retirement. But after doing the real estate game for a little bit, he begins his reconciliation process with the city of Charlotte. He was really upset when he got traded. Said everything that any scorned athlete ever says. I want nothing to do with the city. I'm never coming back. But he gets an offer to become a head coach and specifically to be the head coach of the Charlotte Sting, the WNBA team. He had no previous coaching experience, but they fired their coach midseason. They needed somebody to come in and finish the year out. Muggsy, why don't you come in? So he comes in.
It's a pretty random Rolodex poll.
He is still beloved in Charlotte, and like it was a deeply unpopular move when they traded him. So it's like Tom Hanks at the start of A League of Their Own. Like, look, just show up, wave your hands, and blah blah blah. Muggsy obviously takes it a little more seriously than that, though. Team does struggle the rest of the season, but he wants to come back that next year with a full off season to instill his program. And I got to tell you, across 2 seasons, they're 14-30, and the organization folds after that second season. Not great for the Charlotte Sting. He does get a second chance to be a coach in the Charlotte area, though. He becomes the head coach of the United Faith Christian Academy in Charlotte in 2011. He holds that job for 3 years, and in 3 years, he produces 6 All-State players who would all go on to play Division I basketball before he decides to leave this post to pursue other opportunities. Among them, he is now officially fully reconciled with the Charlotte Hornets. He is a team ambassador. Off the court, trying to make an impact as well. Muggsy and Kim Bogues co-founded the Muggsy Bogues Family Foundation, which connects disadvantaged students with scholarship opportunities. Just as far as their relationship, I glossed over a little bit while we're doing that basketball career. They had a second child in 1991. His name's Ty. They got a divorce in 1997. They got remarried 2015. They're still married. Good for them. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention Muggsy's multiple TV and movie appearances. We already touched on Space Jam. He's one of the 5 players to have their talents taken. Can you guys, though, can you name the other 4? Xavier already named one of the other ones. We know Patrick Ewing. Can we name the other 3?
Charles Barkley's one.
Charles Barkley.
Is it Detlef? Is that the white guy?
It's not. It wasn't Detlef. It wasn't Detlef in that. It was Bradley. Was it Bradley? Sean Bradley. Yes. That's right.
And who is the 5th?
Been too long since I've seen Space Jam. I should know.
I have said his name in the course of this presentation.
That's not going to help.
Tony Bennett.
Teammate with the Hornets. Big guy.
LJ?
LJ. Larry Johnson is the 5th Space Jam cast member.
That is a Knicks legend, LJ.
Definitely the hardest one to name. So I give you credit there. He also made an appearance in Juwanna Mann. We don't need to say anything more about the movie Juwanna Mann. He also made a cameo appearance in Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's a pretty funny scene. If you guys don't know the scene, Larry sees Muggsy Bogues has a nice conversation with him, then sees him goes into the men's room, knows Muggsy's small, wonders if other things are small, gets caught looking to see if other things are small. Muggsy Bogues beats the shit out of him. It's a very fun little scene. In summation for Muggsy Bogues, and specifically for his basketball career, I want to leave you with two stats. Muggsy ranks 25th in the history of the NBA in career assists. He has 6,726. That's pretty impressive. Here's what's more impressive. Among the top 300 people all time in career assists, so basically anybody who's ever been known for passing a basketball in the history of basketball, Muggsy Bogues has the career best assist to turnover ratio of all time. It is 4.69. Career
Pretty nice.
4.69.
It's pretty nice. That was a good switch out. That was a good swap out.
4.69 assist to turnover ratio for Muggsy Bogues. And I think the fact that he is the all-time leader in the stat that is like the best thing to encapsulate how efficient is a point guard. We have true shooting percentage for shooters. We have assist to turnover ratio for how efficient are you as a point guard. Muggsy Bogues is the most efficient point guard of all time. It's important to say that because everybody just remembers him as being the little guy that somehow played basketball. This wasn't like it was some fucking charity case that he's just out there. He was an extremely legitimate point guard, annoying pest as a defender, averaging almost 2 steals a game in every season in which he was fully healthy. We do him a disservice if we just remember him as the little guy. We need to remember him as one of the greatest point guards of all time. We need to remember him as ultimately one of the greatest athletes to come out of Baltimore. He is thoroughly a Baltimore guy. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but if you want to know more about that Dunbar Poets team, ESPN 30 for 30 did a nice documentary. Baltimore Boys, costs $3 on YouTube. I would highly recommend. In conclusion, Muggsy Bogues, fucking awesome. Not just a little guy, a great basketball player, and a great guy.
We will certainly remember that guy. Will we remember him in the Hall, though? I mean, I've been very passionately supportive of Muggsy Bogues, I think, to this point, but I do think it must be pointed out, this is not necessarily his fault. Of these three, Muggsy is at some kind of disadvantage because there was not a chance to professionally ply his trade or ply his trade for longer here in the city of Baltimore. They took the Bullets away from us. It's unfair.
He did. They tried.
He should have had a chance. He should have stayed with the Washington Bullets. I would have even said, all right, DMV. But that is, I think, a tough obstacle for him to overcome. You know, it's a tall task, one might say, stacked up against these other two.
No, it's tough. And again, I think it's one where we're talking specifically about Baltimore Guys. He spends by far the most time outside of Baltimore of these three guys. But, I mean, to your point about the Bullets, like, he didn't want to leave the Bullets. The Bullets didn't protect him.
This is true.
He turned his embrace towards the DMV, and the DMV shunned him.
Am I taking this as you don't want to push to put all three in the Hall to satisfy your Baltimore nature?
We can't break the format.
I would have done it just for you, James. I want you to know that.
No, we have to be decisive about this. I mean, the other question is Muggsy Bogues too good? Because here's Toots could argue. We could argue she's too good, but we've established the Babe teacher.
Yes, I saw that and I immediately thought
she does not
exceed
the
line. It's the baseline. She doesn't exceed it.
Yeah. And I mean, there have been several coaches who have won more championships for Hopkins than old Father Bill Schmeisser. What do you think, Diaz? I will ask your honest opinion. Is Muggsy Bogues too good to guy?
I don't think he's too good to guy because, like, my whole point in talking about his accolades is that people don't remember that, like, it wasn't just like, oh, like a fun little joke that, like, Muggsy Bogues goes out there for his, like, 4 minutes a game. Like, I feel like that's what the idea of his NBA career is. And what it actually is this over a decade-long career in which he runs incredibly efficient offenses and is also the most annoying motherfucker ever to play defense on you. Like, I can't imagine the idea of being picked up 94 feet by Muggsy Bogues. Like, that would be my personal hell. Is, like, if somebody told me, it's like, I'm imagining, like, my dad saying, like, finish your vegetables, but it's like, okay, dribble 94 feet against Muggsy Bogues, and you can't get up from the table until you dribble 94 feet against them. I would never do it. And I don't think like most people in the history of the NBA would if they had to dribble the whole court.
Yeah, I don't think that Muggsy Bogues is too good to be a guy, so I don't want to disqualify him for anything. I think he's a great guy. I do think Bill Schmeisser and Toots Barger are a slight tier above. And again, through no fault of Muggsy's own, he did spend like half of his life not in the state of Maryland and not in Baltimore. But that does mean we have two other guys that spent 80 years pretty much only in Baltimore.
Schmeisser did die sooner. Schmeisser does not get credit for as many years in Baltimore. If we're just going by sheer number of years in Baltimore, this is easy arithmetic.
The thing that I'll say to just put Muggsy's discussion as like having a chance this week to bed, I think when he goes back to the Charlotte Hornets to be an official team ambassador, that is him self-identifying as a Charlotte sports legend ahead of a Baltimore sports legend.
And again, that's the position he was put in, and he seems to have rose to it with aplomb.
Right. And look, again, relitigation, this is maybe a different discussion, but specifically in this Baltimore context, I am willing to narrow it to Bill and Toots.
With that being said, we are stuck between the official team sport of Maryland and the unofficial regional sport of Baltimore, and two absolute legends in both of them. And James, I really do want to defer to you. As much as I love Toots, I want to defer to how you're feeling either way, because this is your city.
Not like we're not going to do that, though. I do want to point out real quick, I don't know if you mentioned this, but speaking of the officialness of these state sports, Toots did try to get Duncan
she
the
tried.
Official state sport.
She tried. Didn't work, but she tried. If she got it, that would have been I would have saved that for the end and been like, by the way, there is another state sport, but unfortunately that was not successful.
I'm not going to pretend like I knew about either of these coming into this. Like, I looked up Bill Schmeisser. There are other lacrosse players that I've watched play more, that I've followed more in modern times than Bill Schmeisser. I have an equal amount of attachment to both of these sports. I've never pursued either particularly strongly, but I participated in both quite a bit as a young child. I mean, I guess what have I done most recently? Had a toss with lacrosse or played some duckpin. I've played duckpin more recently.
Let me throw in another criteria for you, because I'll steal something from my Muggsy presentation. It's an inherently Baltimore thing to have a nickname. And Bill is a nickname of William, but Toots is a way cooler nickname than Bill.
And for the record, he was sometimes called Father Bill Schmeisser.
Father Bill is a good nickname.
Father Bill's pretty good. It's still not quite Toots. And again, like Toots, I refuse to look at her, but just from your reactions, it confirmed everything that I have assumed about her.
You got it spot on. You got it 100% spot on.
She's an extra in John Waters' Hairspray is essentially what I'm saying. Like, we're talking exactly what John Waters' masterpiece, we should say real quick, Hairspray.
In your mind's eye, is Toots smoking a cigarette, or does she have a lip in?
Oh, she smoked. We didn't hear. There's not a lot of dip in the city. It's a cigarette city.
Fair. Again, this is why I asked.
Which I assume is the case. But that's also, I mean, like, Bill Schmeisser was the Baltimore of his time. Toots is the Baltimore of her time. Her time was close.
I just found a screenshot. It's from a local Baltimore television newscast in 1991, and it's just a picture of Toots, and she looks exactly like you thought.
Yeah.
And the lower third that says bowling legend. I'm gonna no matter what, I'm sending you this picture so you can see it and be like, yeah, this is exactly what I expected 80-year-old Toots to look like.
Okay, here's the thing. If you're gonna put this on me, which I think is unfair, you're making me choose between things that I want to love equally.
Well, it's either you choosing or Diaz choosing. And I don't want to put that on Diaz because Diaz is not the... If this was a Philly episode, I would put that on Diaz and tell him he can't use ChatGPT. But I'm trying to avoid that right now.
What it comes down to is that while the cross holds a special place in the city of Baltimore's heart, in Maryland's heart. While it exists here, it does also exist in other places. And as we've discussed, although duckpin bowling exists here so thoroughly that I kind of knew that other bowling existed through television and just didn't know why it was so different, like had no concept of other bowling, had never done other bowling. They excel equally in their areas. One area I have to admit, Xavier, I think you have identified is more quintessential to the city. And Diaz, accepting any dissent from you, I believe that leaves us with the honors for one Mary Elizabeth Ryan.
Yeah, seeing and hearing none. One of the cool things that we're able to do in this podcast is we're able to remember things, but we're also able to learn things. We're able to learn about sports. We're able to learn about variants on sports, as we've talked about earlier in this season. There's a lot of just fun, crazy shit that we can do. We've got a Baltimore guy. We've got a fun, crazy sport guy. We've got an arguable GOAT guy. But what we definitely have is the latest inductee into the Hall of Guy, Elizabeth Toots Barger, Mary Elizabeth Ryan, whatever you want to call her. You do have to address her by her formal title as Guy.
And while the hall is a no-smoking facility, for you, Toots, we will make an exception because it is an honor to have you here amongst our hall. You are correctly identified as a ghost. This is not a time where we're speaking to someone that is still alive as a ghost. Hopefully no one has died while listening to this, and all of you that we're speaking to now are still not yet ghosts. And if you're not, and you are still listening to this, then we have some people along with you to thank, and those are the people that help make it so that you can listen to it. There's our producer, Craig, and all the coders behind him, as well as our musical director, Don Ham, for our lovely theme music. While we are very grateful, though, to them, it is you to whom we are most grateful for listening to us and still not being ghosts, because I don't think downloads and streams from ghosts would count on the websites where I can check those numbers, and I like to see those numbers go up. And if you want to help us make those numbers go up, it is very easy to share all of our information by just telling people to check it out at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. Also where you can find anything we're talking about, guys, the day. I don't know. I'm going to probably have to get these guys down to Lake Patterson Lanes at some point soon. So, hey, I don't know. If you want to go duck pin bowling in Baltimore, hit us up there, baby. And as Diaz mentioned just moments ago, I don't know if he meant to do it intentionally, but next week we begin the long winding down of season 9 with the 9th edition of Relitigation. So you have that to look forward to in your feeds next Monday. Anything the two of you have to say until that time?
I really want to try duckpin bowling. So, James, I will be coming down to Baltimore at some point.
Hell
to
yeah.
do that.
Hell yeah, dude.
Make it a RTG live event.
Let's see if I can get a live show at Patterson Lanes going. But until we manage to coordinate that, I have been one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz, and as JFK once said, we remember guys not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
That's not what y'all guys
In our soccer group chat right now, I'm cracking up at Bobby because Manchester United were playing Chelsea. Chelsea went up 2-0 early. Manchester United came back to take the lead 3-2. The game was at Stamford Bridge. All the Chelsea fans were leaving. In the 99th minute, like the last minute of stoppage time, a Chelsea player goes down in the box. They call a penalty. They spend like a couple minutes looking at it on VAR.
They take yes, good. To clarify, they're at the end of stoppage time.
Yes. Yeah,
burning all of this time looking at a potential penalty on VAR. This is beautiful. Please continue.
Chelsea's Cole Palmer steps up, scores. Bobby says GG to the Chelsea fans in the group chat, saying, all right, 3-3, whatever. But the ref lets them play on, and a minute and a half later, Chelsea get a corner kick. Off the corner, they just shoot it from 30 yards, and it deflects in off of a Manchester United player. Chelsea wins 4-3.
It deflects in?
4-3.
Oh, my God.
With a 99th minute penalty and a 102nd minute deflected winner.
I'd be disgusted.
there would not so much shit would be broken around me. I would have a very unhealthy reaction to that.
So Newcastle on Tuesday gave up a 90th minute penalty equalizer that cost us the win, but we still held on for the tie. So like I know a little bit what Bobby feels like, but at least we still got the fucking point.
This is the way this chat went. After the penalty goes in, Bobby says GG, and then Chelsea almost score immediately after on a deflection, and he says, "Wow, almost jinxed at LMAO." And at the second he said that, they then score off the resulting corner. And just says, and fuck me. I can say that officially it went down as a goal in 90 plus 10 and then another goal in 90 plus 11 to win the game.
If you, there are not many ways, I think, in the world that you can write out in few words. This is like the Ernest Hemingway, For Sale Baby Shoes Never Worn, of like a box score, of how to show the most devastating possible result in a box score.
90 plus 10, 90 plus 11.
Yeah.